Evolution of populations. As we mentioned in the previous section, Darwin understood the connection between natural selection and adaptation to the environment, although he could not explain these variations that were occurring from one generation to the next. While Darwin and Gregor Mendel lived in the same era, they knew nothing of each other's work. It wasn't until decades later that biologists were able to apply Mendel's genetics to Darwin's ideas about natural selection. This union of genetics with evolutionary biology focused on changes within population. So genetic variation results from the diversity of alleles. So how do alleles form? You may recall that mutations change the sequence of nucleotides in DNA. Mutations can alter single nucleotides or entire chromosomes, and they are the sole source of new alleles. Although sexual reproduction cannot produce new alleles, meiosis and fertilization shuffle alleles from past mutations into new combinations. As Mendel demonstrated, genes segregate and sort independently during the formation of eggs and sperm, and fertilization is random. The result is that by chance, each offspring has a unique combination of alleles, which is a tremendous source of variation and raw material for natural selection. A key concept in understanding this evolution of populations is the gene pool. The gene pool consists of all the alleles in all the individuals that make up a population. You can think of a gene pool as a reservoir from which the next generation draws its genes. As such, the population's gene pool is where genetic variation is stored. An example of a gene pool reservoir is in this image of a population of wild mustangs. Each mustang has a unique combination of genes, and you can see this uniqueness in the variations of the horse's coloring, their muscular nature, and maybe while we can't actually see it, but we know that there is speed and strength there as well. The variety expressed among individuals is largely the result of sexual recombination, and it is typical in populations that reproduce sexually. The process of meiosis and fertilization, again, like we just mentioned, shuffles alleles within the gene pool and create offspring with fresh combinations. Now, mutations in sexual recombination are random genetic variations, which means they can't be predicted. However, natural selection and evolution is not random. Nature favors genetic combinations that help an organism survive and reproduce. Therefore, some alleles may be more common than others in the gene pool. Now, if populations are not undergoing changes in their gene pools, then they are not presently evolving. This condition is known as the Hardy-Weinberg principle or the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, named for the two scientists who first described it. This principle means that the frequency of alleles in that gene pool are constant over time. And this gives a baseline to make it possible to recognize when a gene pool is actually changing. Now, the Hardy-Weinberg model states that a population will remain at genetic equilibrium with constant alleles and genotype frequencies and no evolution as long as 5 conditions are met. If there's no mutation, there's no migration, we have a very large population size, there's random mating, and no natural selection. Sometimes reproductive isolation occurs, and this is when two populations no longer interbreed. This could be caused by geographical isolation, such as maybe disasters that cause populations to separate caused by earthquakes, floods, droughts, and fires, which may drastically reduce the size of populations. It can also be caused by behavioral isolation, where two organisms of the same species have actually learned different mating rituals, but do not recognize them in each other when they meet and therefore do not mate. And another factor is in temporal isolation. Temporal isolation is when species that could interbreed do not, because the different species breed at different times. This temporal difference could occur at different times of the day, different times of the years, or anything in between. All right, let's take a break and show what you know.